As we've heard this morning, stocks in Europe took another battering overnight. The hardest hit was Paris, down 4% after reports that the credit agency Moodys was looking at a downgrade of France's three big banks over their exposure to Greek debt. Markets were also rattled after comments by Germany's economy minister that a, quote, orderly default by Greece could no longer be ruled out. In the meantime, the British government is considering major reforms to its banking sector to avoid a repeat of the global financial crisis. Chris Roebuck is an economist and professor at the Cass Business School in London. Chris, welcome to ABC Radio National Breakfast.
Yeah, morning, Fran.
Chris, the European market basically fears the euro debt contagion is real and unstoppable. Is that how you see it now? Is that what's going on?
It's a fairly on a knife edge to some degree, you could say. If you look at the stocks in those top three French banks, they closed down over 10% today. But as we know, what happens is that there are people out there in the market who actually make money out of things going wrong by selling short and prices going down. So on one side, we've got those people. On the other side, we've got the EU and the governments who are trying to hold the line. The French banks, most people don't know that actually two of those banks actually own banks in Greece, so people see them as being a little bit close to the problem.
And talking about governments trying to hold a line and playing a role in all this, is an orderly default of Greece, as Germany's economy minister Philip Rösler suggested as a possibility on the weekend. Is there such thing as an orderly default, and what impact have those comments had?
I think that, I don't think that your bank manager or my bank manager would describe a default as something that was orderly. I think we'd be in a lot of trouble. So I don't think actually a default falls into that category. The problem is that a lot of people forget that actually there's a lot of agendas going on here. There's the economic agenda in terms of the situation around Europe and the EU. There's the local agenda in terms of the politics of Germany, France, Greece and UK. And then there's actually the public in those countries. And to be blunt, the public in Germany don't like the idea of forking out more money for other people.
And we've had two high-profile German resignations from the European Central Bank in the past year, one just in the past week or two. Both resigned in anger at the ECB's bond-buying program, which is designed to prop up weak Eurozone states. That reflects, do you think, the growing anti-bailout sentiment out of Berlin and as you say, amongst the German population?
Well, to some degree, you can say that departures have a reason. Some people find a reason to leave that they justify their departure with that isn't actually the real reason. So whether those departures were specifically down to that, probably will not necessarily know. But we know that in Europe there's always a level of discontent with the richer countries that effectively have to bail out the poorer countries. And in places like UK, where there's a Eurosceptic attitude to some degree, the fact that this has actually got to this point merely confirms what people have been saying, that you shouldn't be getting countries that aren't absolutely rock solid economically into the club.
Do you think a downgrade of the French banks, a downgrade by Moodys, is likely or inevitable now? As you say, some of these banks own Greek banks. Do you think this is going to happen, and what effect would that have?
I don't know whether it's going to happen. I mean, we know that Moodys declined to comment on that particular story, so they're holding their cards close to their chest. Will it happen? Won't it happen? I don't know. I mean, we know that S&P have not come out along the same line. So to a degree, it's guessing what the rating agencies are going to do. But I think there's a bigger question around this whole thing, which revolves around actually, should we be allowing commercially driven rating agencies to decide the credit ratings of, in particular, countries vis-a-vis the downgrade with the US and have a significant impact on thousands, if not millions, of people's livelihoods? Because let's face it, we go back to the financial crisis, who was it actually bundled up bad debt and sold and allowed other banks to sell it on as good debt? the rating agencies.
Exactly.
So, they're not dead right all the time.
Chris, turning to the UK, the Independent Commission on Banking, set up in the wake of the GFC, is recommending a separation now between the retail and investment arms of the British banks, aimed at avoiding a repeat of the financial crisis. Do you think that's the right move?
You have to, I think, get across the degree to which the public in UK felt that they had been conned by the banks, and that we have a situation over here now where there are redundancies right across the public sector, across the private sector as well, and they're looking at these banks that are continuing to pay bonuses. And the public over here is not happy, to be polite, about that particular thing. So there's a lot of pressure on the politicians to exert some element of sort of retribution on the banks and to make sure that this never, ever happens again with taxpayers' money. So they're being pushed to do something. And the problem is that we've got those three groups of people. We've got the banks that want to try and keep the British banks competitive. We've got the politicians that know they have to do something because the public wants it, but they can't do too much because it will drive the foreign banks out of London and that will lose tax revenue. And we've got the public that are looking around at their friends in the pub, seeing them being made redundant, and announcements of bankers' bonuses, and they're getting pretty browned off.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Chris Roebuck from the Cass Business School in London, and the four big banks in London, by the way,